All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Blue Star Rising, the Templar Awakening. Michael Henry Dunn here with my esteemed dear friend and colleague, Reverend Maia Nartoomid. And as you can see, we also have a special guest here today with us, Kaliyani Sundari. So welcome, Kaliyani.
Thank you. Thank you
So
so
glad
much for having me here. I'm so honored. Yes.
Yeah, it's a fortunate unfolding, a spontaneous sort of synchronicitous unfolding that the presentation that Maia has prepared to share with everyone today, which is the way of the Priestess Oracle, just so happens to be an area in which Kaliyani has a deep background and sole purpose and education and training, such that when Maia shared with me, Michael, here's the video for today. It's the way of the Priestess Oracle. And I looked at it, and I happened to be a guest here in the beautiful sanctuary home of Kaliyani while I'm staying in Los Angeles. I thought, okay, this doesn't feel like an accident. So that's how it happens that Kaliyani is able to join us today. So what I'd like to do is, Maia, if you'd just like to share a little bit about the creation of this video presentation and how it came through, and the writings that you got back in touch with, which inspired you to create this video. And then I'll just ask Kaliyani to share a little bit more about her background. We'll pause, we'll watch the video, and come back for what I'm very sure will be a wonderfully fascinating discussion. So Maia, so how did this come through for you?
Well, this is from 1996, and it's what I wrote in 1996, and I put it to a visual story in visionettes, and this telling begins with these three visionettes and then goes into understanding in more depth the path of the way of the spirit oracle from Lemuria, from the Melchizedekian temples, hard one to say, through to the current oracles of our feminine oracles of our time now and into the future. So it has a long path, and it is a little under 30 minutes long video, but it took me about 15 hours to create. And I tell you that because generally it would take me for a video that long, maybe about 12 hours, 10, 12. It just takes that long to do that kind of work and to put it together that professionally. But this one is a little longer because it had more detail to it that needed to be visually brought forth, So it's quite a story, and it's like a little movie. It's like, think of it that way. It's a visionette movie. So that's basically what I'm going to say about it till you get to see it.
Okay. So, yes, it's well worth the time and very engrossing. So, Kaliyani, do you want to just share with us a little bit about your background and training in the priestess role and lineage and
yes,
that you bring?
Sure. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me here. This is very unexpected. It's very serendipitous, but nothing happens by chance, as we know. Well, I grew up in Brazil in a very mystical environment. There was a lot of mysticism around me, and I was a very mystically interested child. So I didn't have a very traditional childhood. And then from there, I just, in my teen years, was exploring a lot of different philosophies and different principles, and I studied esotericism and things like that. And then I came to the US, got married, and I put everything on hold. It was like a different time in my life. And upon the dissolution of my marriage, I went into a deep prayer, and I prayed just before the marriage came apart. I prayed for the truth to come to me and for me to be put on my path. And then I had an awakening with Kuan Yin, which I did not know. Of all the studies I've done and read and participated in, that cosmology, Buddhism and Taoism was not in the forefront of my understanding and my studies and my practices. So I thought that was wonderful, because to have her appear in dreams and visions and just see her as this, what I would call like a geisha woman, and doing these incredible transmissions and things that were unfolding in my life, she carried me through. And then I decided to go back to school. I have a psychology degree from UCLA, and then I decided to get my master's. And I was guided towards a very unique program, a spiritual psychology program at USM, which happens to be here in Santa Monica. And it was an incredible process. It was catapulted me into all this trauma healing and releasing, lifting every rock, letting that all go. And after that, I was led towards a training with the mystery schools, feminine mysteries, which I was really called into the work of Ariel Spilsbury and the 13 Moon Mystery School and the Alchemy of Ecstasy. So that brought me here today, doing archetypal work in groups, bringing communities together, creating this blessed space for us to meet, and doing ceremonies, archetypal divine embodiment ceremonies for women to awaken the priestess within and their embodiments for full liberation and the integration of masculine and feminine. So ultimately, I work with women because we need to come to the forefront and fulfill the role, that we're given just to men in the last 6,000 years, so that we can really embrace one another and come into unity. So that's the ultimate purpose. So did I explain
Perfect.
this?
Yeah,
Yes.
that was.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kaliyani.
So,
Yes.
as you say, there are no accidents, and that Maya would bring forth this wonderful sharing, and that we happen to be able to have Kaliyani with us, I think is beautiful. So, everyone, please enjoy. We'll now share with you the video. It's about 27 minutes long, fascinating and deep, and we will come back with you immediately afterwards and share and explore. So we'll be right back. Enjoy the video.
In 1996, I received the following information from the Akasha, which I put into a story-like presentation. It is entitled The Way of the Priestess Oracle. I begin with 3 vignettes taken from true incidences of the past still existing as thought impressions within the Akashic recording crystals of the earth. Orupa stood upon the smooth, polished stones of the temple courtyard that glistened like pearl shells in the moonlight. She pulled her dark green cloak to her as if she could melt her soul into its comforting folds. The cold air carried with it the weight of prophecy. Orupa was aware that her footfalls upon the stones seemed to echo through the veil between space and time, as if she were moving ever closer to the brink of an endless sea. She paused before the great wood and gold doors of the morning house, the temple of rebirth. These doors had survived the great flood that wrenched the land from the roots of the earth and placed this sacred sanctuary upon the roof of the world. In the tossing of the mantle, it had become an isle in the midst of a pool of the goddess, the most holy Uruchaha, the lake of the Lady of Skies. These temple doors, then, represented immortality, and thus they were raised once again upon holy ground to become guardians of the morning house. Orupa placed her hand upon the doors, knowing she would not pass this way again. Those who entered the morning house embraced Savatra, the state of transparency, which led from the old form into new incarnation. As a priestess and oracle of the island of the sun, Orupa had known 65 years in the flesh of her current vessel. Still, she shone with an agelessness beyond the temperance of time. So it was with all the priestess oracles of the great sun. They spent many hours in between worlds, where time does not seek refuge in the cells of the body. Yet Arupa knew that despite her remaining beauty and vitality, it was her time to move through the veil and dissolve her form in order to be one with the rhythm of the tides once again. No voice but her inner self spoke this to her, for it was a sacred acknowledgement that each priestess oracle of the lady must grant for herself. As this oracle of the Lady of Skies stood within the morning house before the flame that does not perish, she slowly let her cloak fall about her feet upon the tortoise-shell floor. She loosed her long hair, still a satin black fire after the years, from the golden serpent coil of her station. Bare to the altar of rebirth, she began the chanting that would take her soul ship deeper and deeper into the pale of the nether sea, beyond the lure of life, far into the core of the sacred tree of the universe. There she would be fashioned into new fruit and ripened upon a distant branch of that same tree. Orupa's mother had also been an oracle priestess, as had her grandmother before her, who was the first of her generation to be born after the flood. Orupa's great-great-grandmother had been an Atlantean priestess oracle, surviving the rampage of waters to bring her girl child into the nest of eagles, the high land of the Jewel Lake. It had been a new age for Arupa's great-great-grandmother, when all the world had been loosened from its moorings and like a ship tossed upon the sea had broken apart, stranding its splintered pieces over many distant places. Now Arupa would close a cycle, for she had borne no children of her lineage. Yet she knew that this was as it should be, for as cycles close, others begin anew. Arupa would carry her light seed into the earth once again. She would harvest her soul from the fertile soil of another land. Arupa smiled, and as she did, a single crystal tear slid from her eye along the graceful arc of her cheek. The second vignette. The oracle approached the tripod of Pythias with slow, measured steps. Her bearing was regal, yet carried also a humility born of service. As an oracle priestess of Delphi, Cassandra was not lured by the elaborate ceremonial proceedings to believe she was anything but what she was, a servant of the goddess. She served the Great Mother, who pressed her whispering lips against Cassandra's heart and psalmed her inviolate song into the priestess's most inner spaces. But in the age that was upon Greece in Cassandra's day, there were those of high rank in the temple who, under pressure from men of prestige and power, had displaced the true emphasis of the goddess at Delphi. Instead, they brought to the fore her consort, the sun god Apollo, as designate for the fountain of light residing within this holy and most ancient place. Cassandra's walk to the tripod was a path of sorrows, as she knew she would be asked questions fastened boldly to her own destiny. Men with power over her mortality would have her proclaim the answers they wished to hear. If she succumbed to their jaded demands, Cassandra knew she would forever reside as a false oracle of smoke and mirrors. Should she blanch at such sacrilege, her soul would be preserved, though her body would surely perish before the morrow. This oracle priestess had met a similar crisis before in a distant land, where she proclaimed a prophecy upon a people who wished not to hear what their own folly was about to place before them. By the rights of war, she should not have survived to prophesy again. Her beloved Troy was no more. It had lain upon its own sword in the dying fields where none should rise again. Yet Cassandra of flesh and blood breathed now the pungent air of the cavern fumes and felt her life surge evermore within her. It was an eternal streaming of her true nature, which was above all else to be a mouthpiece of the sacred knowledge eternal. As she positioned herself upon the Pythian tripod, the Trojan felt within her breast the rapid beating of a dove in flight, pounding for release from a gilded cage to soar free once again. Cassandra knew what her choice must be. The dove must rise above the sun. The third vignette. Swans glided effortlessly across tranquil waters, their limpid reflections belying their powerful majesty. Elaine relaxed her gaze upon them as she bent her slender Swan Knight neck to drink from the spring at her feet. Her hair, the color of sunlight, cascaded about her face. She brushed the locks back to reveal a mouth of soft roundness set firm with resolve. Youth blessed her with its often fickle touch, yet no trial of years could ever find despair in her blue eyes, the color of the mother's holy robe. Elaine bore the radiance of one whose beauty would survive long after the lilies of the field had dried and blown away. Such a destiny had come to her from her generation through the blood of the fairy. As one of the priestess oracles of Iona, Elaine was positioned in time between the pages of an ancient and sacred book divine. It was her oath of life to become a bridge between the fasted melodies of the goddess, echoing as a last refrain from the stilled groves of old, and the holy verses of the Father God and his eternal Son. In the early morning of her hours this day, Elaine had been brought by the high priestess of Iona before a woman bending as a branch with heavy fruit, leaning against the arm of a sunburned man of middle years. The woman, her arms about her swollen body, glowed with the familiar light of one entwined with spirit. Her name was Mari, a sacred name to Elaine, as it signified the veil of those chosen to serve the star of the sea, the mother of the innermost graces. It was explained to Elaine by the high priestess that Mari carried the child of the Son of the Father God. Mari was the chosen vessel for his seed in the earth. The Holy Son's mother, also a Mari, had blessed this child in the womb, conceived by Mari of Magdalene, through an act of spirit after the death of the Holy One. Elaine was given the knowledge of the role she would play in the new life that stirred in Mari that day. She, Elaine, her name meaning light upon the waters, was to become the guardian of this child when it entered the world his father had come to redeem. After the birthing, Mari would leave her son, John Martinus, with the priestess of Iona. Upon his 8th year, Elaine would escort him across the waters to the Crystal Isle of Glastonbury, where he would receive his spiritual instruction. But all this was still ahead of her wondering mind that morning, as she left the presence of the high priestess and Mari, running barefoot to her special place of the swans. Whatever her future may be, she felt a gentle hand upon her shoulder and sighed in the knowledge that this guiding presence would lead her upon her path as guardian to the sun god's child. With the sight of the record of ages upon her, she mused at the irony of this life that had brought her once again to the throne of the sun. I have narrowed the subject further to the category of priestess oracles. After the renting of the veil biblically represented by the fall from grace, the first oracles were female. In the Lemurian, Atlantean, Melchizedekian temples, the oracles were also priestesses, dedicated to using their gifts with sacred intent. Among the male priests of the temple were the consorts of the oracles. Each priest consort was selected with great care to form a spiritual bond with a specific priestess oracle. Through the bonding of this couple, both sexually and spiritually, the oracle was given a means to ground her vision into the physical world. The consort created a knowledge form that polished the pure essence the oracle received. The inner intricacies of this procedure are far beyond present-day esoteric perspective, nor am I at liberty to discuss the innermost workings of these sacred and magical rites. Yet it needs be understood that the sexual aspect of these relationships was far removed from the consciousness of carnal sexuality. Nor was physical sexual interaction the major definition of the magical practice. The priestess oracle and the priest consort worked outwardly in specific roles as well. Sometimes the oracle would speak directly to the temple, but never to the masses. Always when communicating to the masses, and often within the function of the temple, the oracle would connect her source flow into the essence and being of her consort, who would then be the one to speak the oracle's truth. With the takeover by certain male priests of the Melchizedek temple in Lemuria and later Atlantis, most of the female oracles and the true priests of the temple, who had not been killed, receded into caverns of solitude far from the newly formed patriarchy present at the temple complexes. Yet as age turned into age, and both Lemuria and Atlantis were plunged into the sea, so the female oracles once again brought their light seed into the temples. In this period, they were mostly remnant temple cities of Atlantis, such as on the Isle of the Sun in Lake Titicaca, Peru, and the Bimini Islands in the Atlantic. While there were some exceptions, the priestess oracles in this post-Atlantean age seldom included males in their practice, nor were there many male oracles. The few that existed then were considered mages by title and seen as a different sort of spiritual facilitator, more along the lines of a magical instructor. Most priestess oracles in this age were understandably touchy about placing males in any position of power within their realm. These women were the original sea priestesses, the Stella Maris, stars of the sea, which appeared in the legends of future civilizations such as Greeks, Romans, and Celts. The next age of the oracle found itself spreading into the largely unpopulated and dense forest regions of Europe and Asia after the post-Atlantean temple oracles had reached their zenith. By Cassandra's time, oracles had become fashionable to the masses. The enclave at Delphi in Greece had once been a remote oracle cavern complex that served only those who would have been guided by spirit and persistence to find them. As the oracle trend developed, Delphi became as popular as a current-day tourist attraction, but with implications of power and rulership attached to its destiny. If the people believed in and acted on the messages of the oracles, so it stood to reason that those who sought power by controlling the people would seek to also control the oracles. Thus, the insidious internal struggle began. It was at first resisted, but just as a single raindrop at a time can eventually wear away a granite boulder, so Delphi, like many sacred oracle shrines, finally succumbed to the debacle of entertainment, concealing a more lustful design. Originally, a true priestess oracle was not solely restricted to prophecy, but was a vehicle for a wide range of wisdom and insight. In fact, foretelling the future was seldom incorporated in their speakings. Only when it was deemed granted by the divine beings with which they communed could the oracles speak with the tongue of forecast. It was understood that too much prophecy interfered with the co-creative aspect of human spiritual evolution. Planetary events were more likely revealed than were individual destinies. The first Lemurian and then Atlantean oracles focused their power and intent mostly through the movement and configuration of the stars. This is not to say that they were astrologers, although this knowledge was a part of their learning process. These priestess oracles worked directly with the dynamics of the star fields, the energies moving through the universe, only a small portion of which can be determined through astrology. As oracles became more connected to the earth in the post-Atlantean period, most especially in the European-Asian phase, they aligned more with the natural ley lines of the earth and the purpose for which they could better incorporate them in their whole dynamic. They never abandoned the stars, nor were the most ancient oracles unconscious of the earth, but there was a definite shift of major focus through the ages. Largely this was due to the female having been cast out of the star temples by the radical priests of Melchizedek. Thus she sought an even greater connection with her primal mother. She literally burrowed herself into sacred ground to find the healing and nourishment she had been denied by the male usurpation of the star consciousness. There are many sacred cavern areas on the planet that once were the womb centers for the priestess oracles. These were no ordinary caves, however. Each contained a special interaction with a planetary power zone. They were therefore often geologically active places. The serpentine energy of these active zones was represented by the serpents of the oracles. Serpents were much in evidence at the Oracle of Delphi. The base of the tripod upon which the Pythia sat was formed of the twisted bodies of 3 gigantic snakes. The serpent and dragon in most ancient times was a representation of the primal Mother Earth. However, with the assuming of male dominance in religion, the symbology of the serpent was changed to suit the patriarchal dismemberment of the goddess, and thus the serpent became the power that must be vanquished beneath the heel of the god. In conquering the serpent, so the Delphic Oracle Sanctuary demonstrated to its following the power of their gods to overcome the old religion of the original priestess oracles. Although many eons have passed, and the priestess oracle has undergone a de-evolution of her role through time, her true essence remains in the consciousness of the earth. The age is upon her once again to come forth into the world. What is the pure essence of a true priestess oracle, whether it be one of ancient Atlantis or one in our current New Age cycle? Thoth's definition is revealed as follows. Firstly, a priestess oracle is in her fullness when she is receptive to the balance of duality, able to accept her role as a feminine receptor, to be integrated and grounded through the masculine charge. In other words, the role of the consort should not be shut away. This does not imply that every female oracle must have a male partner in the consort role, but that she must be receptive to this principle and open to the possible experience in her life. I wish to add to Thoth's commentary here in saying that he is speaking about a completely balanced sacred union. And this is something that can only be accomplished when the female has accepted her male polarity within and is in resonance with that. The idea that one must have the opposite gender in their lives, whether male or female, and that they are not complete without it, is an imbalanced perspective. The application of balance in duality is also seen in the oracle's embrace of both masculine god and feminine goddess root consciousness in her work. Her highest watermark of achievement should be one of integrity. Many outside forces are forever active around and within her, consciously and unconsciously, magnetically attempting to pull her focus toward the lower desires of others or self. To remain centered in the pure streaming of the source is the one essential principle that must be adhered to by the oracle, both female and male alike. Yet her focus is not austere. Rigidity has no place in one who administers to others, whether it is in the manner of physical healing or, as with the oracle, spiritual revelation. The oracle in her truest role must find her heart to be the innermost temple of her passage to the other world. She must connect that heart-centered consciousness to the earth through her ability to be compassionate to the emotions of those for whom she divines, without becoming entangled within their lower desirous forms. She must recognize that although her gift is of a divine nature, she is still within the human element, and therefore subject to her own process of evolution. Only by clearly defining what that process is for her may she be able to operate as a clear receptor for Source. The Akashic records tell us that at Ephesus in ancient Turkey, the priestess oracles were descendants of the Amazons, the original founders of the temple city. It was the custom of the Amazons to take into individual families a foster child from the temple. Thus at Ephesus, a young girl being groomed by the temple as an oracle would live with the foster family of the city from the age of 12 to 16, so that she would know the sorrow and suffering in the world and not be set apart from it. By the age of 12, most of these young girls had been temple raised since their 4th or 5th year. By this time, they were well on their way to being molded into their roles. Yet lest they become too sculpted with otherworldly ways, they were to live 5 years of their lives within the world they would one day serve as oracles. They still received training during this period, primarily focusing upon the goal of integrating spirit with matter. The current day oracle is unlikely to have undergone such conscious training in her life. Yet all oracles have received instruction through a combination of past life experience, inner plane development, and otherworld guides and mentors. We are moving ever closer to what Thoth calls the new Earth star, which is that next step in our spiritual evolution when we ascend or break through the veil of this current reality to reestablish the kingdom of heaven on earth. As we progress toward this transcending point Thoth calls Light Principle 40, the priestess oracle's role will become more akin to the most ancient doctrines of her service on the planet. The beginning and the end of all things stems from the one sourcing. Yet the priestess oracle will also reveal a new face, upturned to star patterns never seen before by this world, and the dynamics they insert into our field of cognition. The earth under our feet will shiver in the coming dawn of a new wonder, and the priestess oracles will be among those whose sensitivity to the greater truth within will be the wayshowers for many. Of course, as humanity further integrates with their individual God selves, each will become her own oracle. This occurrence will truly be rejoiced by those radiant ones who have had to speak through the select few to the all through so many ages of time. It will then become evident that the voice within is the harmonic of a universal knowing which transcends even the need for the masters themselves as our guiding lights.
All right, welcome back. So I found this just so engrossing in the way that you chose to frame it, Maya, of the three visionettes, as you call them, vignettes and small visions. You know, I would say small visions, large visions, concisely told. And so, do you want to just, you know, there's an arc, obviously, an intentional arc of history that these three stories cover.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to just touch on that a little bit in terms of, because I know there's a personal element to these for you.
Well, yeah, the arc, I think, was delivered to me because, you know, the way I perceive it is that I receive these things. I'm not in some kind of deep trance state. I'm not doing it automatic writing. I'm putting my own talents and energies and soul consciousness into it. But, you know, it just comes flowing out, you know. And so I don't know that I particularly myself chose those visionettes. I think they were sort of demonstrated to me in the ethers, and I pulled them in and worked with them, and there they were. But the way I see it is that all of them are about the changing times. None of them are priestesses sitting in their little nests, you know, and their oracle, and everything is dandy, and they're just, you know, doing their thing, and everything is wonderful. All those visionettes have to do with turmoil and change and putting the soul on the line. In other words, it's one thing to call oneself an oracle or a priestess or whatever, and in good faith, and you know, do your work, and you're studying it, and you're doing this, or you're receiving that, and whatever. But it's quite another thing when you are asked to really walk the talks to such extreme that your literal life blood is involved, and the decisions you make may cost you your life, and yet you gladly do that. I'm not suggesting everyone run out and find something that they have to do that's so dramatic. Of course not. But I mean, life presents you with extreme challenges, maybe not always that challenging, but very challenging. And as it's stated, it's important, though stated, it's so important to hold your integrity in place. And what are you willing to do to keep that in place? If you are a true oracle of some kind, because there's a lot of levels and different ways to be, you know, whether you're male or female, you have a power there that's a little beyond average. You know, we're not going to make it supernatural, but it's beyond average. And that power has the power to seduce. It has the power to charm, to you know, bring people in. Oh, that sounds so wonderful. You know, that kind of a thing. And it's just naturally there. If it's the true power, that's, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like the way you use it, the way you demonstrate it, and how you work with people in understanding what is being brought forth, so that they don't get too wrapped up in the seduction and more in the spiritual content and the vibration, because anything of beauty and light is seductive. Seduction is not negative if it's within the natural flow of events. A beautiful sunset is very seductive. There's nothing wrong with that. It's nature speaking to you in that seductive tone. Come with me, come into this space of beauty and grace, you know? But used within the lower natures, of course, seduction can be very damaging to the progression of the soul, not only to the ones you're seducing, but to you as well. And so I think this is the biggest message, is that there is that power involved. And these particular visionettes show these particular women in the roles of oracles as being very human, and yet they are willing and demonstrating that they will not be swayed from keeping the line of integrity and truth to their service. And I think that's the keynote now more than ever. Well, I can't say more than ever. They had a rough time. earthquakes and you know, patriarchies and everything. But it really, in another way, it's just as rough now. It's different, but it has challenges that are just as extreme and will get more so. And this is speaking to every human being. Those of us, male or female, who have the ability to reach a little bit beyond the veil. And speaking for women, there's a little more, there are more pitfalls involved because the male patriarchy still is in charge. And we can see it more than ever in what's going on politically in this nation, and those who are refusing, absolutely refusing to help humanity. And they don't even mind if you know it anymore. They're not even trying to clothe it. So the place of the oracle, male or female, is very much needed now, because we need to define oracle. Again, going back to the video, oracles, the ancient oracles did not consider themselves prophesiers other than when it was necessary. You know, that was not what an oracle was about. An oracle brought the wisdom, the knowledge through and stimulated the hearts of others to engage it. But, you know, there were times when it was necessary to prophesy, but those were very specific and usually had to do with world events. There were times when personal ones were acceptable, but this was deemed through the connection between the oracle and her source, and could not be swayed by somebody saying, oh, please tell me this or please tell me that. That's not the way it worked. It was only after the oracles were pressured to perform in a way that would bring a bigger audience to the coffers of the patriarchy. And then the next step was to make sure the oracle said what the patriarchy wanted them to say. So that was, you know, that's where everything kind of changed. And in that mix, we came out with, in our modern times, of thinking that an oracle, there's only one thing they do. That's prophesy. And I hardly ever prophesy. So, and I consider myself an oracle of sorts. So, you know, I'm not just speaking to myself, but the whole event is just not intended to be purely or even mostly involved in foretelling things.
All right. Well, the role of the Priestess Oracle, particularly today, and I'd just like to ask Kaliyani to share here, in terms of what you've been describing, Maia, in these three stories, that there are times of upheaval, there are critical times of choice for the soul, where the role, you need to embody it in a way that calls for commitment on the most essential level. And so I just want to ask Kaliyani, in your own life experience and in finding your own integrity in the Priestess Oracle role, have there been moments like this for you, or do you see moments like this coming, where this kind of choice is before you, where you know, are embodying to the best of your ability the Priestess Oracle role, and there are seductions, distractions, or possibly even moments of defining choice on a, you know, on a survival level? Have you experienced that, or do you see that coming?
All the time, constantly. Yeah, it's a continuing process, and I feel sometimes I talk to spirit and I say, do you have to try me again? Don't you get it by now? And I couldn't agree more. I mean, the most crucial element, everybody in training and everybody in process of evolution wants to have this magnetism, to have this ability to channel or to, you know, but it's, the crucial point is the seduction. You can't really be there and hold that space effortlessly, because it's how, when you're ready, it just happens. The universe is coming together for that to happen. What happened to me was very effortless. And I've been tested and tested and tested and tested in many different ways, you know. And are you willing to, how anchored, first of all, are you in the truth of the higher reality? How rooted are you in that? That's one crucial point for you to achieve that level of, I'm not forgetting that when I'm seduced.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still there. So that's extremely important. And I think I've been, I can go into details. I don't think they matter so much, but yeah, like turning away huge sums of money. I've done that, huge sums of money, but choosing my dignity, choosing the right to be free in the manifesting my purpose. Yeah, and the training goes on. It goes on in so many levels. And who are you, you know? In January of 2020, before we went into lockdown, I held a circle, a sacred circle here in the temple, and it was about self-inquiry, because I'm always trying to gently bring them into this own understanding on their own, you know? Who am I now? Who am I now, and who am I choosing to be as I move forward is a constant commitment and recommitment and recommitment. And I think in that process, you get to become truly anchored. And how much do you really believe in the ultimate reality, and you're working with it continually, no compromises, right? To maintain that level of integrity and connection to it, working with it all the time. Yeah.
Yes, it's a never-ending practice. And again, it's true for all humanity. But I think people that have certain talents to lead others on a spiritual level, and lead is a touchy word, because we shouldn't be leading anybody. We should be helping people to find their own leadership within. But you know, from the perspective of the world event, it is seen as a form of leadership. And in that role, that's when you're really under scrutiny from the divine. And I don't mean some Godhead, you know, with glasses on watching you, but I mean the divine within. It's saying, okay, you're on the line now. It's good you're doing what you're doing, but watch your step.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've found that when I wrote the book that I wrote, Romancing the Divine, a friend warned me. You know, I said, "Oh, this, you know, the chapters are just pouring out and talking about the divine romance and the blending of human love and divine yearning, and how can we, you know?" She said, "Well, that's lovely." And she said, "Get ready to be severely tested if you are now presuming to express, you know, words of divine love are pouring through me. You're going to be asked to step up, and the dark places where you're not actually already living to it are now going to be brought into sharp focus.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be a rough ride." But I had no idea. Rough does not begin to describe it. At least in terms of my life, it was painful and difficult in the extreme during that time.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, you know,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, looking at the whole of it, it's important to look at the masculine role in the whole thing with the female oracles and all of that. And we already know about the darker side of that, but let's look at the lighter side. You know, the souls that were in male incarnation at that time, because we all shift around in our incarnations, but the souls that were in masculine incarnation at that time, that supported and became, you know, an integral part of the true dedication to the divine feminine. Those men who were invaluable in the whole process through the ages, they, they're still among us. Some of them are females and some of them are males now again. But not only that, because we do such revolving chairs as far as who's who in the zoo, but the actual act of anchoring the male vibration in integrity with the divine feminine doesn't revolve. It doesn't play musical chairs. Just the soul interaction with it does. So as the males presented themselves in those roles and carried those roles through the eons, they developed a matrix for that, a command center for that, so that the planet reacts now and has a reference to go to help those souls in male incarnation now who are spiritually involved to find their place in the whole thing. Again, remember, the term oracle is not implying prophecy. So if you stretch that out to its fullness, everybody that's spiritually involved is to some extent touching into that oracular vision of spiritual continuity on the planet. And so I just wanted to do a shout out for the guys here, because their role is extremely important in this whole scenario. And they don't have to find a female to be with to do that role. They can be, it's not like that. Yes, both addresses that, men and women can come together in a very higher evolved state and work with that program of light where that balances it out. But you don't need that to do it. You have to find that opposite polarity and love that and bring that expression forward in the current polarity of the body. That's the important thing. The other will take care of itself one way or the other.
Yes, and that's something that, for example, the Templars, in the inner stream of the true Templars, were all about the balancing of divine feminine and sacred masculine polarities within the soul, within the heart. And when you're describing those consort men who were in support of the Oracle Priestesses in these times of transition, upheaval, persecution, I remember you used the term Swan Knights, ANI, like the Templar Knights, to describe souls in male incarnation who had stepped forward to support and, if necessary, defend the Oracle Priestess, the Divine Feminine role, and that, in these Atlantean times when the Patriarchy moved in and took over, there's what you call the radical Melchizedek priests. Of course, Melchizedek means King of Peace. There's nothing patriarchal or dark about Melchizedek himself as a divine being. This is a perversion by in a falling age of a debased masculine impulse that those radical so-called priests but they manifested it to the extent of murdering priestesses and murdering the consorts who defended them. So now that we're in just such a messy, chaotic time, that what we are doing our best to embody with the Johannine Templar stream that has been established in Crestone is, primarily that. To me, it's like, like my role here on Blue Star Rising with you, Maya, right? I mean, yeah, I have my own contribution as a devotional musician, a storyteller, director, etc., and I get that out there, and that's fine. I take great joy and satisfaction in the role of supporting and bringing out the downloads and transmissions that have come through you as an oracle. And it feels totally natural to me. It's not like, oh, I'm going to put myself in the support role of the priestess. No, it's there for me. And when, at your encouragement, I took on what we'll call, for lack of a better word, a leadership role within the Johannine Templars, and a title, those dangerous things called titles, of lineage protector, Well, I was uncomfortable with it at first, but gradually I just thought, oh, well, this is just actually the natural inclination of my soul. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and in a not a top-down hierarchical patriarchal leadership understanding, but in a consensus-oriented, what Anna Wilson Schaef called matrifocal way of finding a way forward.
Oh,
Thank you for bringing that out about the masculine role.
yeah.
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 Anything coming up, Kaliyani?
Yeah, I feel that, you know, in this process of reawakening consciousness to uh, the reverence of the divine feminine within culture as well as within ourselves. First of all, to be in the culture back again, which, you know, the media as we watch it, it's so hard for us, you know, in this position to be able to witness what's the condition of the world right now and what's in most people's consciousness, what do you call the debauchery of
Mhm.
not only the masculine consciousness but the continuing throwing out content that is also um, um, objectifying the female, over sexualizing the female. So that is all in the lower levels of the our desire bodies and all of that. And I think I always feel that we have to, in the workings, we could move so much faster forward when man come forward and they no longer abide or will agree with, you know, the status quo, and they will step up and vocalize, and actually more and more men coming out and saying, I don't want to be a part of this. This is what I'm looking to do. And this, I think evolution would accelerate quickly.
Yeah.
Extremely fundamental to have these conscious man come forward with voice and creativity like you're doing, and assist in the transition. It's fundamental. I feel like it's yeah, it's very, very important at this time, and I think it would accelerate everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Totally.
Yeah.
I wonder if you want to comment, either Maia or Kaliyani, on the part of the story you presented, Maia, with the oracle called Elaine on the Isle of Iona,
Mm-hmm.
and her role as the foster mother to the child who would become John Martinus, the son, as the story is shared, of Mary of Magdalene, Mary Magdalene,
Mm-hmm.
and Yeshua, you know, the Christ. That's you know, that of course differs from some versions of the Magdalene story. You know, that she came to France and had a daughter named Sarah, and you and I have shared on that a little bit, but because it's part of this story,
Yeah. Okay.
this Kaliyani as well. Do you want to share your
Mm-hmm.
elaborate?
Uh, Mary of Magdalene did go to France after she went to France after she left John with the priestess. That was her path to do that. And they met up again later. She didn't not ever see her son again, but these were days when these things were understood and it was not a problem with it, even for the soul that was the child. But so she did go to France, you know, and she did have a life there. But Sarah, according to Thoth, is the grandchild. That's John Martinus's daughter. According to Thoth, again, or the Goshic Thothic records, or whatever you want to call it, John Martinus was the only child of Mary and Yeshua, and he was conceived as well as born after Yeshua made his transition. And all of that occurred on the Isle of Iona. It was more a secretive thing, and brought forward only after Mary was quite pregnant to Elaine and let her know, you know, what she needed, her role and all of that. But that all took place somewhere on Iona. So a lot of these children that they're speaking about were actually grandchildren, maybe some of them even great-grandchildren. Now, when I received all of this, I was aware, although I had not read the book like from cover to cover, I hadn't read it at all, really, but I was aware of the Holy Blood, Holy Grail book, because that came out, you know, a few years before I wrote what I received. But, you know, this is what I received. So even though it was not the same as what everybody was saying, I had to be true to what I received. So I wrote it. Only more recently, about, oh gosh, I guess it was 6 years ago now. It seems time flies. I was watching a show by the naked archaeologist. That's what he calls himself, for naked archaeology. And it's just this, you know, this Hebrew guy who's really well defined in his work. And he looks at all different aspects of historical archaeology. And so in this particular episode, and I didn't watch it all the time, but I happened to be watching it, he traced the lineage of Yeshua to the island of Majorca. Some of Jesus's relatives had to get out of Dodge when he was crucified because they were after the relatives. They wanted to kill them all and, you know, whatever. So they said, we better leave. So there's a whole reason why they went to Majorca, which I don't remember, but they wound up there. And so he goes, the naked archaeologist, I don't know why he calls himself that. He's perfectly clothed. But anyway, he goes over to Majorca. And he finds this stone there that actually commemorates that this is the place where the relatives arrived. And so he finds some of these relatives to talk to, well, you know, descendants way down the line. And it's interesting because, see, they're all Jewish and that religion. So they don't believe, you know, that Jesus was the Christ. They just think, well, he was a relative and he was a prophet. That's all they know. And, but in speaking about it, they say from their lineage, because it's been handed down, you know, all the knowledge of this, they say, yes, he actually had, he and Mary Magdalene conceived one, well, they didn't say one, they just said conceived a son, and his name was John. And I nearly fell off my chair because that was where I actually received some kind of confirmation that there was a child, a son named John. So I bring that into the story to show that there's at least something that brings some kind of, you know, connection to what I got from Thoth. But whatever, you know, that's what I receive. So whatever I receive, I put out there.
I do want to ask, I remember you touching on at some point that there was a paragenetic purpose in the birth of John Martin is through, you know, and his being foster mothered by the soul Elaine that comes forward, that there was something about the some kind of infusion of what we'll call divine genetics into the human bloodstream or genetic matrix, that apart from the fact that John Martinus was, as you call him, the first Templar, and the stream that goes down through the Cathars to the Templars, and of course then the terrible time when both of them were brutally suppressed, but that there was some divine role in this bloodstream that, you know, and had to be fostered by the surviving priestess oracles of that time on Iona.
Mm-hmm.
Is that coming in for you as something to?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact wording that he gave me, which I have written down somewhere, but the reason why this had to be just one child and was conceived as well as born after his transfiguration is because when Yeshua did indeed transfigure, he didn't just not die and go off with Mary Magdalene and have a whole bunch of kids. You know, that's not the way, according to Thoth, it worked. Because according to the Thothic record, Yeshua was not an ordinary prophet. He had opened his soul at the time of baptism to receive the flow, the stream from the archangelic Christos. And this is a particular archangel, but as you can say it more than that, it's a spiritual energy, universal, that entered into him that we call the Christ at the time of baptism. And it departed from him at the time, it departed from him at the time of crucifixion, but it returned when he was transfigured. Now you're wondering, why is it coming and going so much? Well, there was a sequence of events para-genetically that had to take place. And listen, we could spend an hour on that. So I'm just not going to go into that, but there was a flow, a waveform of the Christic energy interacting with this Yeshua personage, his soul was already highly developed and had another soul with him until the baptism, and that soul left and only came back at the crucifixion to help him go through that. So there's a whole dynamic there of souls layering and helping one another, and then the divine energy coming in and then flowing out and then coming back again. All of this, it's a dance of spirit. But I know it sounds like I'm getting off, but it's so hard to just put it in so many words. So anyway, when Yeshua's soul left the body and became transfigured, that's after he was, I have not yet risen, after he rose and he was transfigured, paragenetically then, he was merged back with the archangelic frequency. And it was in a higher state of evolution than when he was in the body, because the genetics held it back. The genetics are genetics. They are limited. Paragenetics are limited too, but not as limited because they are a universal imprint. So now he was in this transfigured state. So when he impregnated Mari, however that happened, that energy was unique. So the child that came out of that, he wasn't another Christos, but he had a unique imprint of the Christ vibration in his field that could be transferred genetically into humanity. Now, if they just had some kids before then, if they'd had a son before all of that happened, I'm sure it'd been a very enlightened being, but it would not be possible within the constricted reality of the genetic form to be able to carry that unique frequency through, which it was if he was transfigured first. So, you can go on and on with that story, but that's basically what was shown to me.
So that actually seems to lend some credence to the idea that the role of the Templars was to protect a sacred bloodline.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. But it's different from how people see it at this time. I mean, somewhat different because of the nature of the event and the fact that John Martinus opened a path for the Templars to be able to do the work that they did. That's why Thoth calls him the first Templar. He didn't establish a Templar order. No, that was way before that. But he opened the path for that. And incidentally, the soul that was John Martinus was the soul of Thoth, same soul. And Thoth is one of the 9 sun spirit souls that are Christed energy, but he's not the Christ like we understand with Jesus. It's just another terminology of experiencing this vibrational level. Yeshua's role was very unique, and it's not going to come again. Other things, but not that. So, but Thoth, the soul of Thoth, as one of the 9 sun spirits that supported that vibrational presence of Yeshua, the Christ in the body of Yeshua, it would stand to reason that one of those sun spirits would be the one that was elected to be the son of the son of the son.
What comes to mind for me is that in the there are no accidents category,
Mm-hmm.
talking about the history of the Templars And, you know, they had their 200-year arc from 1118 AD in Jerusalem to the persecution and raids and suppression in France in 1307. But in Portugal, there was not as much persecution as there was in France of the Templars. And they simply changed their name to the Knights of Christ, and that the Templar stream in Portugal is believed by many, and the wonderful author Freddie Silva has very much, that Portugal is really, first of all, was created as a nation by the hidden Templar stream, and that it, you know, contains perhaps, you know, that even that paragenetic bloodline is preserved there, as well as there are secret orders there, some not so secret, some more secret, that continue that stream. And I bring it up just because of another interesting coincidence that Kaliyani is of Portuguese heritage.
Now, isn't Sintra in Portugal? It is, isn't it? Sintra,
That's Portugal,
yeah. Well, Sintra is the location, according to Thoth again, where the platform to help us move into the conscious state that we need to be in order to go through Light Principle 40 and ascend into World System 2 from World System 1. That platform, which Thoth calls the Pyramidus Radius Matrix, when it ignites and starts forming the holographic pyramids of light that we will be able to literally absorb into our body, that point is at Sintra. So it just kind of all...
I didn't know that.
Wow.
Have you been?
Yeah. We just did a whole work in it in the Quantum Logic Interactive. We did a whole process with Sintra. Yeah.
I'm about to visit Portugal. Yeah, very soon. As soon as everything is cleared in terms of, the lockdown.
Yeah, you're doing a pilgrimage of sorts.
To Portugal?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
great.
Including Portugal, maybe Santiago as well, and the south of France as well. Like, all of the Qatar region.
Yes.
Well, it feels to me as if we've maybe come to a good closure point, but I just want to open it up to either of you to, you know, if there's any other aspect of either of the video that we saw that you'd like to comment on, or anything else coming through for either of you at this time.
Well, I always learn so much from listening to Reverend Maia. There is such a beautiful, authentic transmission coming from you. It's all so new, especially on the meta science, and I'm so grateful to even just be here and participate. And I feel like I'm just here to receive, and there was such beauty in the work you do, and all this graphic that you create that's so extraordinarily, enlivening for the soul to be witnessing. So I just feel extremely aligned with, especially not the historic line, which, it's not to my knowledge, those 3 vignettes that you described in those 3 priestesses, but the inner aspect of the requirement. I mean, how many times have I used the word integrity in my work? It's incredible. People know me for it. It's about integrity and commitment to truth and anchoring in that space. And how are you ready to really resist the what do you call the seduction, right? And the that are constantly, very few are able to, even if you really very sincerely want it. Most of us crumble at the presence of these challenges, And I couldn't agree more with you. This is the ultimate entry point to become that holding space of light, that point of light for the assistance, right? The focalizing, like we say in the 13 moon, we focalize, we don't lead. We focalize or we facilitate, as USM uses, we facilitate your own awakening by just living as an example of it, which to me is the greatest teaching other than talking about it, because mental knowledge is mental knowledge. Everybody can have it. Now presence and walking the talk is the true teaching, right? So
Yes, it is indeed. Yes, thank you, Kaliyani. You know, the Quantum Logic Interactive, I keep talking about it, but it's my go-to at this point in my life, is not only about the broadcasting of the terminals into the planet of the frequencies, the quantum frequencies from the inner earth that are being orchestrated very integrously to clear and strengthen the true vibration of the planet. But its sidekick is the Mysterium teachings. And so this basically is my mystery school at this point in time. And the people who are participating don't have to have cubes or even capsules. Some, you know, if we didn't have the cubes, well, we wouldn't have that part of it. So it's good that we have people that have them, but you don't have to have them. And you can still participate and be a part of it in the experience of the mystery teachings and how they're presented in synchronization with these streamings that we're doing through the terminals out into the planet. It's a very unique combination that Thoth and the beings in the inner earth with him have given me to present my work in that manner. And there's no fee for it. I do really appreciate donations on a regular basis, but if you can't do it, you can't do it. You're still welcome. So I just like to mention that again. And of course, there are always my spiritual sessions. And I want to mention that, you know, I do mentoring. So instead of just getting one session here and there, mentoring is a continuation of sessions, usually on a monthly basis. One lady's requesting twice a month. That, you know, is evolving. It evolves the process of learning whatever it is that you want to learn and want to focus upon.
Right. So we do want to encourage any of our friends out there who feel called to explore that possibility, certainly of a session with Maia and perhaps mentoring and counseling unfolding. So again, I'm just so delighted, Kaliyani. Thank you so much for responding to this spontaneous development that came.
Thank you, Kaliyani. Personal thank you from me to you.
Yeah,
thank you. It's been an honor for sure.
Yeah. So again, donations. There's a donation link there. There's a link to Maia's sessions. Kaliyani, with your permission, I'd like to put your, Kaliyani.com and associated websites there for everyone. So thank you, everyone, for joining us at Blue Star Rising, Templar Awakening. And we look forward to having you with us again. Namaste. God bless us, everyone.
Namaste.
Bye for now.